If organizations really want to protect their customer base, grow their customer base, grow their loyalty, protect their margins across each and individual order going through, stop looking at things by department, right? Start managing the entire data thread, because that entire data thread is what is going to drive the entire experience along the way.
Welcome to Deliver, the last mile performance podcast, where we explore what it takes to operate, scale, and differentiate in today's market. I'm your host, Bloch, and I'm the CEO at Brink.
And I'm Raquel Zanoni. Together, Guy and I chat with some of today's most knowledgeable retail and logistics leaders to discuss the last mile, specifically how it's evolving and what success looks like.
Today's guest is Paula Natoli, Director of Global Strategic Industries at Google Cloud. She sits at the center of cloud infrastructure, AI, and industrial supply chain strategy. Before Google, she spent years at Blue Yonder working directly with retailers and logistics providers on planning and execution. In the interview, Paula made the great point that KPIs should measure the customer experience, not each department's performance. Paula made the point that every team along the order lifecycle can hit 100% of their own metrics, and a customer can still walk away unsatisfied. So, siloed, functional KPIs can hide failures that only show up at the doorstep. How about you, Raquel?
I really loved her perspective on being proactive instead of reactive within the customer experience. Paula described how AI can identify delivery failure hours before it reaches the customer. The difference between a customer who leaves forever and one who stays loyal might come down to catching a problem on incident 3 instead of incident 20. This was a really great conversation, so let's not make the people wait. We'll dive in, and don't forget to subscribe to get future episodes just like this one.
Hello, Paula. Great to have you on the Deliver podcast, the last mile performance podcast, where we peel back the onion on why last mile move from the basement to the boardroom, and what are the ways to achieve success, competitive success. Good to have you here. Your current position with Google Cloud, I must tell you, it's unusual in the supply chain world. You sit at the intersection of cloud infrastructure, AI, Google AI, so big time AI, and industrial supply chain strategy. Before that, you spent years at Blue Yonder, working directly with retailers, logistic providers on planning and execution. And I have to ask you the first question. Can you quickly touch on your current position with Google so we all understand the scope of your mission?
Sure. So first off, Guy, Raquel, thank you so much for having me. I am so happy to be here to have a great discussion on things that we are all very passionate about. So yeah, I'd say my role is a little unique. So first off, what I don't do is I cannot fix your Gmail or your YouTube issues. Some people wonder, you're at Google, you can help me with these things. No. So to your point, Guy, I get this perfect area of opportunity to have my focus be at an intersection of two things that I'm extremely passionate about. One is supply chain. Second is technology. So the role that I get to play within Google Cloud is to say, hey, Google, and I'm going to say broadly Google, Alphabet as a whole, and then even more so now Google Cloud specifically, we have amazing technology, right? The innovation trajectory is moving so incredibly fast right now. We produce amazing technology. My whole role and my goal is to say, how do we take that technology to use it to solve some of the most complex supply chain and logistics challenges out there? So I get the pleasure to continue my work in working with retailers and logistics providers, and frankly, all industries, to say, how do we use data and AI more effectively to solve problems across our global supply chain? So it is I think it's one of my most favorite places to be.
Awesome. And you have a lifetime of experience in logistics, and you even been recognized as one of the top women in the supply chain industry. So what drove you to solving challenges across the complexity of the supply chain in the first place?
It's funny, Guy. I would say, we all have our like first jobs, right? If you go back to being your first job, and what I can say is I did a little 2-week stint. I was in high school, right? A local industrial pipe fitting company, somebody like that, needed a couple of high school students to count inventory. So I'd say I spent 2 weeks as they shut down and we physically hand counted all the inventory of those pipe fittings. So did that excite me? No. But I will say my roots go back to that. But what I would say, Kai, is, I'm a Penn State grad, a great school known for supply chain. And when I was at Penn State, I knew I was a business major. And as you go through college, you kind of have to take all those introductory courses, right? Kind of the 300 level courses, intro to accounting and finance and management and marketing and supply chain. And I remember vividly, I went through accounting, finance. I'm like, oh my gosh, I am not doing this stuff. And I sat through my introductory supply chain class and it clicked. I said, oh my gosh, wait a minute. I get this. This makes sense. The ability to have critical thinking and apply it to something so profound that is really the backbone of the entire global economy. It's like this perfect intersection, just like I talked about supply chain and technology. I found that within supply chain. So, that's the path that I headed. It clicked. It made sense. So I got my degree in supply chain, which back then in the 90s, it wasn't even called supply chain. It was business logistics. So it's evolved a little bit, but I tell you what, Guy, I still have that passion. I even go back to my alma mater every semester and guest speak in the intro to supply chain classes, hoping to convert some more supply chain professionals. So it's been quite a ride.
Well, let's double down on that then and get a bit deeper into metrics and outcomes, specifically in the last mile world, because most last mile conversations today, they really focus on speed, on cost, on customer satisfaction, but really as isolated metrics. And the data that informs those outcomes often degrades as it moves through the order life cycle. If you think about it, from purchase to warehouse to carrier to doorstep, it's fragmented. And my question to you is, where does data most commonly break down as order moves from when they are placed to when they are delivered and then the knock on the door?
Yeah, and you've hit the nail on the head there. If you think about it, it's a complex interaction. It's not just a one little transaction. We are looking at the life cycle of the entire order. Where it's going to break down is the handoffs across each of those, right? Because it's not just placing one transaction and boom, it's accepted and out the door it goes. But there are going to be different systems across each of those. And those are not even just within one organization, right? You're going to place the order from the retailer point of view. It's going to be handed off. It's got to go into the warehousing side. It's going to be handed off to a carrier. So each piece of that entire cycle presents an opportunity for that data break to occur. So of course that makes sense. But even, I'd look at it and say each step of that process independently has its own challenges that could be broken outside of the big three as well. So if we maybe even peel that back a little bit further, we can look at this and say, why do the data breaks occur, right? So we know that they are there. Why are they occurring? First and foremost, we can have a lack of synchronization and timing, right? Something gets placed, it's not synchronized fast enough with another step across the process. And now you're looking at two different systems of record, if you will, at any point in time. You could have data mapping issues, right? If I am now working across these systems, a SKU ID over here is called a product ID over here, which is called then how do I translate that into my order systems? And if I don't have the right synchronization across timing or across the underlying data management, if you will, each one of those just presents more and more opportunity for those data breaks.
I think what some of our listeners might be thinking now is, so what? Like, why does it matter if those breaks happen in the data? Or I do my part, I do the handoff, and so who cares? can you maybe give us some examples of where those data breaks impact customers or cost? And perhaps you can point to a retailer or a 3PL as an example.
Yeah, so I think the fun part of everything in supply chain, particularly as we talk about last mile and final mile here, is we're all consumers of it, right? So we don't have to look any further than our own experiences. And I guarantee, Guy, Raquel, you've had it. I think all your listeners have had it. And sometimes those moments stick with you. Okay, so I'll give you my own personal example of the one that has stuck with me for quite some time. I don't know if any of you all have children or had to find the top toy for the holiday season that they were banking on having. Well, I can tell you, my son, he's a little bit older now, but he wanted this Thomas the Train toy. And I will say, this was Toys R Us back then, so now I'm going to date all kinds of stuff here. But I sat there online, waiting, right? Out of stock. I eventually, it came up again as being in stock, and boom, I hit that order button as fast as you could get. I got the confirmation. I was so excited. 24 hours later, order canceled. Right? How'd that make me feel? It was awful, right? Absolutely awful. So I could have actually handled it better knowing it was just out of stock. But the promise of that satisfaction that I actually was able to submit my order and then to only then be dropped back down, it's an awful feeling. So, did I go back to shop at Toys R Us? I know, look what happened. But anyway, another story. But my point is that level of customer experience is absolutely felt. And in my case, or in many of your cases, it's absolutely remembered, right, as well. So where do those data breaks occur? How do they actually happen? That's such a prime example is that phantom inventory, right? You think you have that inventory available to be able to allocate, and you don't. So in that case, guess what? You just, you're losing the order. But now if we take it further down, let's talk about another data break. Let's say I did get my order, right? Well, now it's out the door and it's being shipped, and lo and behold, I wrote an incorrect address.
This happened to me last week.
So tell me about it. What was your experience?
So I'm like writing my email to I'm not going to name names, but I put the address in with the correct street address, but the wrong city and state. And so there was no address validation done at the e-com at checkout. And so I was arguing, well, this isn't on me because you all should have validated the address and realized it doesn't exist. And they're like, well, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do at this point. That thing's going wherever it's going to go. And so they told me they could give me credits, but I still had to pay another $15 for shipping. So I had to double pay for the shipping, which was I'm not going to go back to this retailer, unfortunately, because of that.
Right. And that soured it. And in that example, to your point, I've had the same exact issue happen to myself. That's exactly it. I had the right address, but it went back to myself. I had my own city and state instead of where I needed to actually ship it. So it was a mismatch. But to your point, how did you figure out the problem? Did you figure it out, or did they proactively tell you it was wrong?
I figured it out. I was like, why is this thing still out for delivery for 2 days? I don't understand. It was supposed to be delivered 2 days ago. And then I finally looked it up and I noticed, I was like, that's not LA, that's Chicago. Oh no, that's going nowhere.
Exactly. And so it's caught in a processing limbo. And again, to the end, if you fast forward to the end, you can even say, yeah, it was my fault. I get it. But the whole customer experience is completely broke. Whether or not it was your fault, how do we start to proactively identify and fix those issues before they even happen? So I'm with you on that, Raquel.
Thanks. I just wanted to be validated that, yes, it was me, but also a little bit on them too.
Right. But I think this is a great point, because if you look at the rise of e-commerce with all of this, the amount of storefronts that are readily available, the big folks, they got this covered. They're doing address validation. But the small ones that are looking to grow and build out that loyal customer base, those are some of those that absolutely have to catch up here when you look at it in terms of that. Now, In this example, you had to pay the $15. But what if this fell as a problem of a translation layer? A label was printed out wrong in the warehousing from the retailer's point of view. Now you're still doing redeliveries, et cetera, and that's going to cost them as well. So it's going to hit on both angles, which just means, hey, let's figure out a way to fix this up front. So address validation is a critical thing. And actually, I should mention, you mentioned $15 reship. The stats out there about failed deliveries, let's make this tangible, is what, $17 to $18 an incident?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well,
or redeliveries, where you have companies that reach 10, 11, 12% of redeliveries. When you look at millions of dollars a year, millions of deliveries a year at scale, that means so many customers, either the delivery arrived earlier, which means they were not at home to take it, or later than what was promised, which means they were not home to take it, and they are not coming back. But then on the flip side, the cost of redelivering falls on the retailer. It's just managing that part is so critical. And I wonder, because you called it the rise of e-commerce, and we also call it as the never-ending increasing customer expectations, and the move from the basement to the boardroom. It's no longer an operational play, like C-suite. That's what they focused on. I wonder, how do you see the KPIs evolve as customer expectations and complexity increase?
No, I think that's a perfect tangent into this, because the KPIs are, just as our global supply chains are getting more and more complex, that means the corresponding KPI metrics and the expectations of all of us as consumers are also much higher and more complex. So I think there's really that differentiator is moving away from functional KPIs to more of experience KPIs. So if you go back, Raquel, to your example, the address validation that failed up front, it took your order, right? Guess what? They picked it fine. So you're at 100%, and then there's a failure. So along that journey, you can say, oh, I did my job. But in the end, were you how satisfied were you, Raquel?
Zero. Even though they recognize, they're like, we're so sorry. It was a great customer support experience, but at the end of the day, I really didn't want to have to pay again, and I didn't want this thing to be late. And unfortunately, it is still being reprocessed.
Right. So in that example, again, perfect example, KPIs need to be more customer centric than function or process centric, because it doesn't give you the full picture. It gives you just your portion of it. But in the end, if Raquel's not happy, the whole process failed, in my opinion.
So Paula, I really want to go back into the KPIs of last mile, because in the end of the day, we're talking about the promises we make to customers, and then say what you do what you say. What happens when you made the promise and you're not showing on time? You showed up before, you showed up after the promise. So I wonder, from your experience and what you see in the market, how KPIs evolve as customer expectations and complexity increase.
Yeah, I think it gets back to the whole looking at it through the entire customer experience and satisfaction versus individual silos. So maybe let's use another example. So we talked about the address validation mishap over there that Raquel had, but what if maybe what we were ordering was a shirt, right? So order was captured correctly, address validated, it goes off to the warehouse, it's picked perfectly on time, it's shipped out, Raquel gets it, she opens it up, and it's blue instead of red. Okay, so we have a different problem. Again, along the way, it's 100% until, well, maybe there was a mishap there. So that kind of the total cost to serve or the total customer satisfaction, we got to be looking at those metrics, because I'd almost equate it. We always say in the world of supply chain, we're only as strong as our weakest link. Well, one of those failures along the path subsequently led to the in the end, it's a 0%, right? Raquel's not happy. And this one wasn't your fault, Raquel, by the way. But let's say maybe, how do we start to identify it? And I think maybe I'm taking a slight tangent here, but these are the areas of opportunity that we have to also start to interject AI and AI agents. So if a label was maybe misplaced between the bins, and so I think I'm picking the right one, right? But in the end, it wasn't. So how many of those incorrect picks do we end up going through before we catch that issue? So can I maybe start to interject AI in here to proactively monitor the customer complaints coming in and know that, hey, there was one, there was two, there was three. So back to your point, Raquel, your customer experience for customer service was great because they handled you well, et cetera. But in the end, there are 10 more people after you who have the same problem. So what if we start to interject AI in here to identify that pattern on number 3 versus waiting for 10, 20 of the wrong ones to go out and then eventually figure it all out? So Guy, I think there's such this great opportunity to look at KPIs and where we can inject new technology to go across the board.
Absolutely. And you talk about AI, and I immediately think data maturity, because your AI is as good as your data. If you don't have your data in place, normalized and scalable and ready to serve the AI layer, it's very hard for you to unlock additional value and perfect customer experience using it. And I think you and I, all of us in the tech space, we know that having the right technology doesn't guarantee performance. Even if the organization is really investing in either building in-house or taking that from the outside, if the organization is not aligned around how data flows between teams, they will fail. And many retailers, we know that, and logistic providers, they invest in the platform, but still operate in silos. Merchandising, IT, logistic, customer experience teams, and each and every one of them measure different KPIs. They measure different ways of success. So my question to you is, have you seen organizations in your work, meeting with different retailers, have you seen organizations undermine performance just because they live in silos?
Yeah, it's still a huge problem, right? Every organization, think about it, even we go through this, I'm sure every organization does. We're developing our OKRs for the year, right? What are our objectives within the organization? And guarantee we all have metrics that are here, right? We're within our own world and we're working to optimize those metrics. So your examples are perfect. Guess what? Merchandising and sales. They want to sell. They want to sell, right? What if I flip the side and say, wow, on the supply chain side, I didn't order enough inventory. So can't promote something. Great. I got the orders, but guess what? I'm not delivering on it. Those need to be synergized. And that's not even getting all the way through to the last mile. That's a failure up front with those levels of silos. So we see that across the board where each individual department, and to your point, Guy, let's say the technology is there. The data is flowing beautifully. We have it integrated. We have it connected. It's all, behind the scenes. Organizationally, if we are not producing and working towards that complete kind of, total customer experience, we are going to miss it. So we end up, I say we safeguard ourselves. We safeguard our own metrics within each of those individual silos. So whether or not we have the right technology in place, if we are not organizationally working towards those common goals, there's still going to be that type of failure.
I feel like we've been sort of touching on some of the doom and gloom and when things break down, what it looks like. I think it might be good to shift a little bit and talk about what good looks like across last mile operations. So specifically when you have organizations that have that true data maturity, have less of that chaos across those silos. Maybe you can share an example or a story of a retailer that you see that's doing this really, really well today.
Yeah, I think it comes with a foundational of being more data driven. data-driven types of decision-making across the path. So where does that come from? Guy, as you mentioned, we started saying AI. We're not going to do all those cool AI things unless we have a solid data foundation. So the best ones that I see are organizations that are investing and focusing in on building out what that data foundation looks like. So that could be the integration of data semantics between systems, right? We all invest in levels of best of breed solutions to run and optimize portions of our supply chain. If they don't know how to talk to each other, we still have that problem. It goes back to our conversation on breakages. So Raquel, I think a big portion of it is I see organizations who invest in levels of setting the data strategy and foundation, mapping each of those points along that entire customer journey, because we're going to proactively identify where those breakpoints can be, align the KPIs, establish a level of governance around all of that data. And then we're layering in all these levels of AI and, the examples we were talking about earlier, where now I'm going to do, proactive exception management. So maybe just one example I'll give you is this is a grocer that I've seen that invested in just making sure it's a level of complete visibility of inventory across their entire network. If you think about it, it comes from different systems, right? It might be on the order level way upstream from the supplier, in transit to their warehouse, sitting at their warehouse, in transit to a store, sitting at a store. And even that portion of understanding how much inventory do I have, that's a data foundational issue, right? Now I can do all the other cool stuff on top of that. But the investment to say, it takes you away, Raquel, of optimizing each step, because I need to connect everything together, even as the foundational level. So some of the best organizations that I see are putting in place that and having, data champions who are helping to map all of that out, because that is going to be the solid foundational structure by which we're going to invest and, utilize all this cool new technology that's coming out.
What is the risk in your mind when we have teams using different technologies that are not connected, and then they measure their success in isolation rather than just against end-to-end last mile performance?
Yeah, it's a sub-optimization, right? We're all in the world of supply chain. We want to optimize everything, right? So in this case, we want to optimize the entire customer experience. So Guy, I think we're just going to get stuck in these cycles. I'll use this example. I spent a lot of time in upstream planning, and just think about forecasting. So I got to forecast everything that's going to be sitting on the shelf for my store or being placed into a warehouse for e-commerce fulfillment. I can forecast at a higher level, right? I forecasted 100 units. Might be perfect. But if I go down to the details and say, well, wait a minute, I was completely wrong on this SKU and this SKU. But if I added them up, it looks like I'm doing great, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of a synergistic way that we end up sub-optimizing the entire customer experience. Again, we focus too much on just an individual silo versus everything.
So Paula, let's move now to talk a bit about the future of last mile through a data and alignment lens, okay? Because we know retailers and logistic providers increasingly, they rely on multiple carriers, fulfillment models, and technology partners, which really means data fragmentation is getting worse, definitely not better. And then the gap, knowing data is a problem and actually fixing it, is where most organizations stall. What are the effective ways companies can address fragmented data across systems, partners, and maybe even delivery networks from your position at Google and seeing the entire universe in front of you?
Yeah, I think a key thing is, I go back to the points I raised earlier, right? We got to think about mapping the entire flow. And as you're identifying those, you're seeing where those critical potential breakpoints are. Having and investing in a data foundational strategy and approach is going to become critical. Again, it's going to make sure we stay out of our individual silos, because we're going to look at everything holistically. I also think that there's areas of opportunity to inject AI to help us identify where we have flawed data. It's almost like this chicken and the egg. We have flawed data. We can't use AI. Well, maybe we can also use AI to more proactively identify where we have flawed data. So think about the cycle with some of that. If we look now, to your point, we're working with many different organizations within our ecosystem. So it's more and more diverse, right? Each time we're actually growing what that universe looks like. I think a lot of it comes down to ensuring we are working with technology that is able to easily converse across all of that. So, think back to the days when applications were built and we were all this little proprietary thing, and then we bring up microservices and APIs operating across standards that know how to talk with each other. So I don't have a failure because I don't know what one thing is when I'm trying to connect these things together. And maybe, Guy, maybe this is a good point to bring up for folks who were at NRF this year, right? Google announced UCP, Universal Commerce Protocol. So, we're talking about each of us individually going to a website and hitting, okay, I want to buy this, and what does that process look like? But the matter of fact is how we all look to purchase, that's all changing as well, right? We're going to be utilizing agents, and organizational agents across each of those need to now be connected. And it's not just an understream data flow of systems, it's agents connecting, or how you might go buy something comes up within an agentic interface. All of those now have to be able to be tied together. So these standards and approach allow for technology to be developed so we don't hit those breaking points as we start to expand more and more into what that ecosystem looks like.
So again, I think we're thinking really high level. And I feel like a lot of our listeners are probably not quite ready to start running with agentic AI. They're probably still thinking about that foundation. You have the Walmarts and the Amazons and these big players in the space who have a lot of silos, but somehow manage to maintain that data integrity across those. What do you think, retailers that look to the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world as sort of the best in class, where should they start if they want to improve that data alignment and maintain that integrity across their supply chain?
Yeah, it's probably a couple of different facets to that, because, and this goes back to our earlier conversation, we have technology, we have culture and organization, and we can't look at them in silos, no pun intended. We're talking about a lot of silos. But I think that holds true here. Having more of a focus around a data-driven culture kind of sets that foundational strategy, right? So you need to invest and focus on having a champion, I'll go back to that point, that's going to help to enhance that within an organizational culture to start. Because if we don't have that, everything else is everyone's going to continue to work on their own little individual pieces. So I think those areas of opportunity to have more of a data-driven culture becomes that foundation, thinking about data governance, thinking about the synergies across all of that, and then coupling all of that within the user experience in and of itself.
That's a great answer. So if we're thinking about data maturity and this alignment as a way to create a competitive advantage in last mile delivery, how do you see that playing out, or how will that work?
Well, I think, and I'm going to go back to our examples in the end, right? We're talking about the individual siloed KPIs and the fact that where's the complete satisfaction of the entire experience. As we build out that data foundation, we're going to make sure the happy path goes smooth, right? Because that's the worst thing. It's already a happy path, but we have breaks along that happy path. But we know there are so many opportunities for other things to happen. So where I see a lot of this opportunity is now I'm going to inject AI to identify proactively issues and resolve them before they happen, right? And that's why I was asking you, Raquel, is did you have to identify the problem that you didn't get that package? And yes, you did. So What if we're now interjecting this a lot faster into the process where the retailer or the logistics provider identified that problem, fixed it, or contacted you along the way, along with, I'm so sorry, Raquel, here's a 10% off coupon for your next situation. We're going to get this resolved. How different would that experience have been for you?
Might have used that 10% coupon, probably. I think, yeah, probably would have been a better outcome.
So I think, when we focus on the foundation of data is going to give us that unified data layer to be able to identify that problem happening 48 hours, 24 hours, 5 hours before it actually happens. And now you take a different trajectory.
I love that idea of using the data to be proactive in your customer experience rather than reactive, which is where I think a lot of retailers are, in fact, stuck today. They're just in that sort of cycle of reactivity, and they're not really sure how to break it.
I'm listening to all this answer, and I'm enjoying the conversation because we're really peeling back the onion on so many aspects of last mile performance, but with big focus this time on KPIs, and then the data, and then the technology and the synergy, and moving from fragmented system and processes to integrated system and processes to eventually achieve one thing that everyone desires, and that's the customer experience. A customer comes on your website, they find the product, they want to see compelling delivery options that are personalized to their needs. Then they convert, they check out. From that point, it's all about the experience all the way to the knock on the door. If you communicated, you said what you do, you did what you say, they are happy, they come back, returning customers, and the loop keeps on going. Lifetime value is at its peak. And as you do that, you keep reducing the cost per delivery. So consumer win, retailer win, everyone wins. Very complex because for the consumer, it's seamless. For them, it's product, checkout, knock on the door. For us, the operators, the retailers, the technology providers, all the different partners, it's hundreds, if not thousands of variables that moving around to make that happen. So what I like in this episode is first, it's the understanding that last mile is no longer in the basement. It's up in the boardroom, one of the highest priorities for retailers this day. That's one. Second, last mile is not just technology and operations. It has to drive KPIs. And those KPIs need to be with orientation to business outcomes. And then comes all the rest, which is how we bring data layers together, normalizing that system together, how we integrate processes. And I would really want to ask you this one last question, because you've seen so many retailers doing that. And I wonder if you could give one piece of advice on how leaders can improve their organization, and especially in the last mile performance, what would it be?
Yeah, I first and foremost, we got to break down the silos. I think we've talked a lot about that. I think that becomes such a critical barrier, both on the technology front as well as on the organizational and culture front, and sets a whole different foundation. But I think what I love about this conversation is many times we equate last mile excellence to just logistics operations, right? We're just doing that. And that's not the case. It's kind of that, if you think about it, that it's a final touch point of your brand to the customer, but it's the entire experience along the way. So, if organizations really want to protect their customer base, grow their customer base, grow their loyalty, protect their margins across each and individual order going through, stop looking at things by department, right? Start managing the entire data thread, because that entire data thread is what is going to drive the entire experience along the way. Because in the end, remember, a perfect pick, we'll go back to those individual KPIs. A perfect pick in the warehouse, 100% lovely, is still a failure if it's the wrong item or the wrong door in Raquel's situation, right?
Can I actually ask one last question? Because I can tell how jazzed you are about last mile, Paula, in the way that you talk about it. So I'd love to know what you're excited about in last mile or supply chain in general in the years to come. And it can be AI, it can be anything really, but something that you see sort of on the horizon that gets you excited.
Yeah, I will talk about AI because it's going to change everything. And that's why I wanted to make sure we injected a little bit here, because we want our own experiences to be wonderful. We want the right product, the right time, the right price, the right promotion, you name it. The ability for a lot of this newer technology that is moving so incredibly fast is going to serve as such a catapult to that experience, which is what all of us as consumers are also going to be experiencing on the front end. So I see this great connection point that is going to streamline the entire commerce experience across the board. So yes, I am jazzed about all of it, Raquel.
And what do you see that translating to for consumers? I think what we saw, in the last 10, 15 years is faster, more reliable delivery. So where can we actually go? Is it delivery in 30 minutes? Is it, are we going to see more drones in the sky? Where does that take us?
Oh, well, yeah, you're going to see that. And that's already happening, by the way, right? So start to look at some of that. So the I want it here and now, I think we were becoming more and more accustomed to that than we were, even just several years ago. But what I would say here is, I don't want to say decouple, but we're going to tie these things together. The expectation of placing the order and getting it when, how we want it is one thing, and we can optimize the heck out of that thing. But where we're going to see everything with AI coming up front is not just fulfilling the order, but helping you find what you want or what you don't even know that you want or what you need. There's going to be so much more levels of personalization because it's a scale issue as well. The personalization is going to come in there that now is going to allow us to convert and deliver even faster. So hooking up both sides of the house.
I can't wait for my drone delivery to come right to my door. I'll be able to send it the correct address at any moment, and it'll switch directions.
Just make sure it doesn't go to LA. And they got the address validation in place. Yeah. Paula, that was such an insightful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. That your passion to last mile is there, and I hope that those that will listen to the episode will just get the understanding that there's so many coins that need to drop in order to take last mile to really make it front and center, where your brand shows up, and that's where you meet your customers and how you bring them back to buy from you again and again. Thank you, Paula. See you very, very soon.
Thanks, Guy. Thanks, Raquel. I really enjoyed the conversation. Take care.
Thanks.